pray for Mr. Speaker.
I invite the Minister of State for Trade to lead the House in a prayer or reflection.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Happy Monday morning to everyone. As we gather here today, let us center ourselves in a spirit of unity, compassion, and wisdom. Let us acknowledge the responsibility entrusted to us by the citizens of British Columbia to serve with integrity and dedication. Let us remember the interconnectedness of all beings and the preciousness of our planet. May we act as stewards of the earth, mindful of the impact of our decisions on our future generations and the delicate balance of life. As we embark on this legislative session today, may we be guided by the light of truth, the strength of our convictions, and the collective will to build a better future for all. A future that is just, fair, inclusive, and prosperous. Thank you.
Introduction by members. Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills. Private members' time.
Member for North Vancouver Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start out by acknowledging that I'm speaking on the territory of the Lekwungen people, specifically the Esquimalt and Songhees nations, and I thank them for the opportunity to live, work, and learn here. Additionally, I'm fortunate to live, work, and learn on the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations when I am in my riding of North Vancouver Seymour. This morning, I stand to speak on accessibility standards, and I've had the support and assistance of one of our interns who has studied in accessibility at Western University and has her undergraduate degree in accessibility studies, Alexa von Keilenberg, and I'm grateful to her for the help and support she's given me in doing this statement. I'm honored to stand before you today to discuss the remarkable progress we've made in implementing Accessible BC Act. In June of 2021, the Accessible BC Act was passed in partnership with people with disabilities and the broader community to identify, remove, and prevent barriers to ensure the full and equal participation of people with disabilities in British Columbia. The Act came about following wide-ranging consultation in 2019. It builds on the accessibility legislation of Ontario, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia, while complementing the Federal Accessible Canada Act. Part 3 of the Act mandates that the government and prescribed organizations establish an accessibility committee, accessibility plan, and a feedback mechanism. The government has created BC's 3-year accessibility plan, Accessible BC, which outlines how ministries will make government programs and services more accessible. Government has also launched an accessibility feedback tool so people can report the barriers they experience accessing government programs and services. Certain public sector organizations, including municipalities, regional districts, school districts, post-secondary institutions, municipal police departments, and public libraries, were required to follow the example our government has set by establishing their own accessibility plan, committee, and feedback tool by the 1st of September 2023. Last week, I had the privilege of visiting UVic and witnessing firsthand the remarkable progress their accessibility committee is doing to create an accessible learning environment for all. For example, UVic conducted an accessibility audit, which included a broad range of consultation, assisting them in prioritizing certain buildings for retrofitting and designing universal design learning resources for students. The acceleration program that they established in 2024 has established accessibility training for all IT developers and support staff, as well as a re-evaluation of all their IT support materials to ensure plain language, universal design, and website accessibility. UVic is a shining example of the work being done by so many organizations to integrate accessibility into their everyday practices. We are supporting organizations to comply with regulations and become accessible by developing resources, hosting training, and offering guidance. Local governments can also apply for grants of $25,000 once they've complied with the regulations for accessibility projects recommended by their Accessibility Committee. The government is currently implementing Part 4 of the Accessible BC Act by developing accessibility standards in collaboration with the Provincial Accessibility Committee. PAC was established under the Accessible British Columbia Act in the summer of 2021 and is a government advisory committee pivotal in developing and recommending accessibility standards. The Provincial Accessibility Committee has created standards that seek to remove barriers, whether they are physical barriers, communication barriers, policy barriers, or even barriers created by people's attitudes. In emphasizing barriers rather than focusing on a specific disability type, we recognize the diversity of the disability community. PAC, alongside with technical committees who work to assist PAC, are designed to incorporate a wide range of diversity. This is to ensure that the standards are inclusive by having a diverse lens of perspectives and lived experiences. To ensure diverse perspectives are incorporated into standards, engagement with Indigenous peoples and partners has taken place on a regular basis and is ongoing. This includes overviews of draft sections of the standards and options to engage in policy development and provide feedback. The accessibility standards also consider intersectionality. These standards will benefit other equity-deserving groups and can help advance the implementation of DRIPA, support anti-racism work, and make BC more inclusive to newcomers. Service delivery and employment accessibility were identified as excellent places to start for our first 2 standards, as we can build on the experience, success, and learnings of other provinces' legislation in these areas to ensure that the BC standards are based in best practice. For accessibility service delivery, PAC is proposing standards to ensure that all events, activities, and the process of buying goods are provided in accessible ways that promote the inclusion of people with disabilities. These recommendations target barriers within organizations, both in the physical and the virtual environment. The standard aims to empower people with disabilities and ensure self-determination. For example, they address barriers in the physical environment by requiring organizations to provide information about and photos of their publicly accessible physical environments, a trick we learned from Parks BC. For the Employment Accessibility Standard, PAC has developed recommendations for accessible inclusive employment, which cover the entire employment spectrum from recruitment through training through retention. Key features of the standard include informing potential job applicants that reasonable accommodations are available upon request at each stage during the recruitment cycle, and ensuring that workplace accommodations are a collaborative process with as few barriers as possible to succeed. PAC also recognizes the diverse range and size and scope of provincially regulated organizations and is working to define the recommended scope of application for these standards. We hope the standards will support employers to understand how to fulfill their legal obligations. Key considerations as we develop standards are, standards can be reasonably applied to organizations across a broad range of the public and private sector. They do not place unreasonable or disproportionate costs or compliance burden on any one person or organization, and they're reasonably resilient to changing technology and social context.
Thank you, member.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Recognizing the member for Peace River North.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for raising this important issue today. And I would like to take a moment to emphasize the reality that people living with accessibilities and disabilities face in British Columbians. In fact, 1 in 5 British Columbians live with a disability. Probably every single person in this room knows someone or has a loved one that is facing these similar challenges. And these disabilities are visible or invisible, each of them presenting common and distinct challenges such as barriers to accessing essential services, stigmatization, and discrimination. People living with disabilities deserve to live a full and become active members in our communities. Yet these persistent barriers meant that this goal is far from being realized. We need to improve accessibility standards at all stages of life. This means raising the standards to support people living with disabilities and or accessibility challenges, whether it be in schools, post-secondary institutions, in the workplace, in the way that we organize our society and treat others overall. As a representative of rural riding Peace River North, I've seen firsthand the issues that are facing people with disabilities and how they're exacerbated in our smaller rural communities. In fact, just a little story about a young woman. Her name is Christy Lear. She lives in Fort Nelson, and she faced a horrific accident a few years ago and had a spinal cord injury. Now, this didn't stop Christy from becoming a fierce advocate in her community and across British Columbia for people with accessibility issues, people that have disabilities. The community stepped up and wrapped around her. Christy went on to form a group called Step Up and is working with these smaller rural communities to help them become more accessible. However, the challenge that is faced by rural British Columbians is the service levels that people that live in smaller rural communities have trouble facing. In fact, sadly, Christy has had to locate most of the time living in Edmonton because she cannot get the services that she needs in Fort Nelson. Now, unfortunately, Christy's story is not isolated to Fort Nelson. This happens across British Columbians in rural and more remote communities. And the lack of specialized services for individuals with accessibility challenges is forcing them to travel long distances or to relocate altogether. The lack of transportation within and between northern communities presents a real challenge when you're facing extreme weather, mountainous roads. This even puts up more barriers for people that live in these areas to access the services that they need. The gaps in health outcomes that result from these barriers are unacceptable. Rural British Columbians continue to be neglected or ignored in many of these conversations, and the most vulnerable members of our communities, including people with disabilities, are paying the price. Honourable Speaker, also speaking of paying the price, British Columbia is one of the most expensive places to live in the entire country. We're experiencing an affordability crisis. The cost of essentials like groceries, rents, gas continue to soar. Over half of British Columbians are $200 away from insolvency. And as you can imagine, this is even more impactful with people with disabilities. Disability assistance in BC is not keeping up with the rising cost of living, and recipients of these benefits are living far below the poverty line, forcing it to make impossible decisions like choosing between groceries or medications or the services that they need. People with disabilities have significantly higher rates of poverty and unemployment than the overall population, and the provincial government isn't providing them with all the supports that they need and that they deserve. The persistence of poverty in our communities, especially among our most vulnerable, is a clear indicator that their current approach is not working. A new direction is needed. We need to create a future where disability is not synonymous with poverty. The problem will not be solved by expanding bureaucracy without any real results to show for it. British Columbians with disabilities are tired of these endless task forces, advisory committees. We need to make sure, and it's essential, that we are standing up and supporting people with disabilities. It's not just about policies. It is about improving the lives of real people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the member for North Vancouver Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for his thoughtful comments. And we are all on the same page in this area, absolutely. There is work to be done, and we will continue to do that work. Through the standards, we are creating a foundation that can be built upon through subsequent phases of the implementation of the Accessible BC Act. The next step for the PAC is to consult with the public on draft accessibility standards that have been developed and revise these standards in response to public and stakeholder engagement. That public consultation will be initiated during Accessibility Week 2024, which is the last week of May. And we have implemented a phased approach to consultation on these standards. For Phase 1, which ran from January to March, we held approximately 50 sessions with trusted partners and stakeholders to receive initial feedback on the draft standards and to create awareness of the upcoming public consultation. We have used the information gathered from this phase to design a public consultation that will ensure meaningful participation and engagement. The public consultation will start at the end of May and continue throughout the summer, and I will be asking everyone in this House to amplify that work so that we can get as broad as possible information back. We will be reaching out to several audiences in upcoming consultation, including organizations that could be impacted by future regulation, people with disability and their advocates, general public. The opportunities for everyone to share their input will include regional virtual town hall sessions, small group sessions, direct submission, and online engagement. We have heard great enthusiasm from the public who are eager to engage on the accessibility standards. We're looking forward to receiving the public input on the standards and learning from that engagement. People with disabilities are pillars of communities and important to the fabric of British Columbia. Accessibility benefits everyone. These regulations will affect everyone, disabled or not. I implore everyone to take part in this consultation and share your perspective how to make BC accessible. I was very fortunate last week to provide opening greetings and remarks at the Pan-Canadian meeting of disability representatives from across Canada, which I am delighted to add the folks from our Accessibility Directorate are chairing and have been chairing and co-chairing. And they've done remarkable work. And all this work is actually, dare I say it, trying to dovetail together so that we're working as a nation as well as a province to lift everybody up and to provide something that allows the folks with accessible needs to have those needs met in a dignified and effective and methodical fashion. And I am looking forward to all that work being completed, but it is a ways down the way yet. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Yesterday was National Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls and Two-Spirit Awareness Day, also known as Red Dress Day. This is a day that should not have to exist, but we must take time, not only today, but every day, to acknowledge that there are far too many lost women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. In our communities. Today I am wearing red in this house to remember the thousands of lives that have been lost And I want to take a moment to acknowledge our BC United intern for her work on this statement today. The color red symbolizes both vitality and violence. Red is also significant as in many Indigenous nations, it is said to be the only color that spirits can see. This color can be used to call the spirits of those who have passed back to reconnect with their loved ones. We wear red today in hopes that we may help reunite those lost spirits with their families and as a renewed commitment to work to protect communities every day. Excuse me. In rural parts of the province of BC, particularly along the Highway of Tears, a length of the Yellowhead Highway 16 that stretches through several northern communities, these communities are represented by a number of members here in this legislature. Over 20 nations border this section of highway. It is an area where numerous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people have gone missing or have been murdered. Well, this epidemic of gender-based violence facing our Indigenous communities is not unique to northern British Columbia. The devastation and anger felt over these losses is immeasurable. To the families, we will not forget your loved ones. Today, I read into the official record of the province of British Columbia a list of your loved ones. From my riding north along the Highway of Tears, I want to recognize that there are too many lost sisters. Today I honor, I remember, and I will not stop fighting for justice for the following list of women. Excuse me one moment. Leah Marie Faulkner, Jean Kovacs, Roswitha Fushbishler, Nina Joseph, Marnie Blanchard, Donna Charlie, Maureen Sullivan, Therese Humphrey, Alicia Germain, Sheila Kinquan, Christine Kinquan, Wendy Ratte, Amanda Simpson, Tracy Jack, Savannah Hall, Ada Brown, Doreen Jack, Helene Frost, Nicole Orr, Candice Kalmakoff, Ayla Sarik Oger, Melanie Dawn Bowman, Mary George, Jill Stuchenko, Beverly Warbrick, Brittany Guys, Cynthia Moz, Linda Fredden, Anita Florence Thorne, Roberta Sims, Jessie Lines, Crystal Chambers, Kristen West, Air Anderson, Roxanne Tierra, Tracy Clifton, Michelle Pear, Ginny Samper, Monica Ignace, Corrine Thomas, Mary Hill, Alberta Williams, Cecilia Nicol, Kimberly Dumais, Helga Rochon, Sherry Rochon, Pauline Rochon, Delphine Nicol, Ramona Wilson, Lana Derrick, Hazel White, Linda LaFranc, Monica McKay, Helena Jack, Barbara Ann Joseph, Margaret Newski, Kayla McKay, Stephanie Donnelly, Tamara Chapman, Emily McLean, Bonnie Joseph, Chastity Charlie, Madison Scott, Maria Rijo, Loren Leslie, Destiny Ray Tom, Mary Basil, April Johnson, Tara Lee Williams, Shauna Sam, Chantel Simpson, Jessica Patrick, Shirley Williams, Frances Brown, Cynthia Martin, Laureen Fabian, Joy Morris, from my writing, Mary May Dick, Barbara Ann Lanes, Julie Oakley Parker, Natasha Lynn Montgomery, Jessica Ray Newman, Carmelita Abraham, Mary Jane Jimmy, Julia Batiste, Dina Lynn Braham, Dorothy McLaughlin, Gloria Moody, Sandra Rose Boyd, Tiff McKinney, Pamela Darlington, Gail Ways. To the families of these women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals, we are heartbroken for your losses, and we're committed to fighting to bring you justice.
Member for Powell River, Sunshine Coast.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I just want to start by acknowledging and thanking my friend and colleague from Caribou North for those powerful statement on such an important subject that has truly captured British Columbians as we commemorate the deaths and the missing women, murdered Indigenous women and girls, and acknowledging the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. The issue is obviously one that every community feels grief over. And as I came down from the territory of the Tla'amin people yesterday, I drove through a park and saw the dresses on the trees ready to be borne witness by those who march past. And as I passed through the Comox Nation, I saw the dresses hanging to as well commemorate and to remember the past and to remind us of the important work that we need to continue to do. I'd like to particularly acknowledge that in the Shishak community, the community was the home to Cheryl Joe. Cheryl Joe was murdered in 1992, and soon thereafter I became the Director of Health and Social Services in that community. And when we talk about these women and girls, it is important that we always remember that they're part of family, they're part of community, and to know the strength required for families to bear the terrible burden of their loss, and from that to create strength and to think not just of their loss, but of preventing the losses for other community members. I think of Cheryl's three boys. And can't help but admire their ability to not just get through their day-to-day life, but to actually think about the importance of children in their community and the importance of creating a circumstance for their friends and their families' children that is different from those of the past. And we need to always remember that we need to reduce the vulnerability of children and young people, and we do that by ensuring that the capacity is there to elevate, to strengthen, to nurture. And when we do that as a community, we are doing what is necessary to respond to the tragic stories. When we work towards bettering our communities, giving strength to those who feel weak, we are attempting, making the efforts necessary to redress. And I think of Cheryl's death resulted in the February 14th, March 34th year. And I think of her sons, I think of her aunties, her cousins, who are all part of that movement to bring strength, to bring courage, and to remind one another and all of us of the importance of doing what we can with the voices that we have to strengthen those who need strengthening, to comfort those who need comforting, and to live with and hold hands with those who are left to bear those burdens. So I thank the member opposite for bringing to mind the names of those who've been lost. And as we do so, we think of their elders, and we think of their families, and we think of their descendants. And we do so with love, and we do so knowing that we have work to do to continue to strengthen communities and to keep them close. And so I thank the member for a statement.
Thank you, member. Member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I wanted to thank my honourable member from Sunshine Coast for reminding us all of the power of our voices and the power of community. So the community of my riding came together over this weekend in support of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Volunteers from the Quesnel Tillicum Society Native Friendship Center distributed over 300 dresses around Quesnel that lined streets, homes, and businesses, and hung at the entrance of the footbridge over our Fraser River. Each of these dresses were smudged before being displayed to honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals. A prayer and acknowledgement for those lost were also held at the Quesnel Women's Memorial Monument before a walk to Spirit Square for the opening ceremony, including a prayer, smudging, drumming, and traditional healing. At the Memorial Monument, we also acknowledge the other women missing and are murdered from our community, and I want to read their names into the official record of the province of British Columbia. Amanda Kimberly Gore, Janice Hack, Mary Agne Thomas, Eva Eileen Baker, Caitlin Averill Murray, Barbara Ann Smith, Kathy Mundell, Santok Johal, and Jessica Yeager. I also want to draw attention to the 2 missing Indigenous women from Dawson Creek. We took the time at this event to set up identification kits. For those who are unfamiliar with identification kits, they collect fingerprints and hair samples, which are then given to a trusted person to safeguard in a freezer should they go missing. It's reprehensible that not only as a province, but as a country, that we're in a place where we have lost so many people in this way, that this kit is something that people need to think about creating. This should shatter our hearts and fill us with desire to do better. It is our collective duty to work tirelessly to make communities safer so that never again will an Indigenous woman, girl, or Two-Spirit person have to create an identification kit. Before I take my seat, I would like to tell my community if you have any information that can help bring justice to these people and their families, please call Crime Stoppers, Tip Line, or the Quesnel RCMP. These women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals and their families deserve justice. Or if you do not want to go to the RCMP, drop something off at our office. Justice is needed for all of these families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for North Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, everyone. And I just want to start by saying thank you to the speakers that both spoke on that very important topic this morning, and thank you very much for bringing that to us today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to stand up today and talking about an important topic that's especially important to me, and that is childcare. The month of May is Childcare Month in BC. It's a time to pay tribute to the unsung heroes who dedicate their lives to taking care of our children when we are unable to. For too long, access to affordable childcare has been a struggle for many families and often treated as a luxury rather than a necessity. Thankfully, through many great initiatives, we are changing that narrative. Through our commitment to Childcare BC, this government is laying a foundation for a future where access to affordable, quality, and inclusive childcare is not just a dream, but a reality, a core service that families can depend on. Affordable childcare isn't just about balancing the family budget. It's about changing lives. It's about giving children the best possible start in life, providing them with a nurturing environment where they can learn, grow, and thrive. And it's not just families who benefit from affordable housing, affordable childcare, Madam Speaker. It's also good for our communities and vital for our economy. Since the creation of Childcare BC in 2018, this government has made significant strides in all facets of our childcare plan. Let's take a moment to reflect on that progress. Our childcare affordability programs are making a tangible difference in the lives of families across the province. Average childcare fees have plummeted from $45 a day to approximately $18, thanks to initiatives like the childcare fee reduction and the $10 a day Childcare BC program. In addition to more than 15,000 spaces in a $10 a day Childcare BC program, over 143,000 children are benefiting from reduced childcare fees, with families saving up to $900 per month for younger children and $145 per month for school-aged children. When combined with the affordable childcare benefit, many families are paying $10 a day or less for childcare, including those not participating in the $10 a day childcare program. The Affordable Childcare Benefit is an income-tested provincial program providing up to $1,250 per month per child to help eligible low and middle-income families with their childcare costs. Families making less than $45,000 per year may receive the maximum affordable childcare benefit and paying nothing out of pocket for their childcare. Families making as much as $111,000 per year may be eligible to receive additional childcare support through the Affordable Childcare Benefit. An average of 35,000 children have received support through the province's Affordable Childcare Benefit each month so far in 2023 and 2024. Access to quality childcare is essential to families, and we're committed to expanding access across the province. Since 2018, we funded the creation of over 37,000 new licensed childcare spaces, with more than 18,000 already open and providing care for children. Our focus is on long-term community investments that are run by public and not-for-profit institutions, ensuring sustainability and accessibility for all families. Quality childcare is about more than just spaces, Madam Speaker. It's about people who make those spaces come alive, the dedicated early childhood educators, affectionately referred to as ECEs, and other providers. We've taken action to recruit and retain ECEs by enhancing wages, providing better access to training and professional development, and streamlining pathways for international ECEs to become part of this sector. Because when our ECEs thrive, our children thrive. That's why we continue to work to recognize, support, and uplift the ECEs, including the wage enhancement of $6 per hour and increased professional development opportunities. We are making life more affordable for hardworking families in BC and supporting the childcare sector that enables people to pursue opportunities and make life better for British Columbians. Every child deserves a chance to reach their full potential, regardless of their background and abilities. That's why we're committed to supporting inclusive childcare that meets the diverse needs of all children. Through enhanced funding through programs like supported child development and Aboriginal supported child development, we're ensuring that every child has access to the care and support that they need. Our commitment to Indigenous-led childcare is unwavering. Since 2018, we've supported the creation of over 2,000 Indigenous-led childcare spaces with partnerships that prioritize culture, language, and community need. We're working hand in hand with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit organizations to build a childcare system that honors and respects Indigenous cultures and traditions. Madam Speaker, a couple of weeks ago, I was given the opportunity to stand up and talk about a wonderful initiative that's happening in the North Island. There are different models of childcare across the province, but I'd like to once again highlight the collaborative work that's happening between School District 72 and QP 723 to bring before and after school care to the footprint of 7 elementary schools in the district. It just makes sense, Madam Speaker. It allows for continuity for students, provides ease to parents with one drop-off and pick-up place. The joint initiative is going to provide an additional 210 before and after school spaces across the district, and I'd just like to once again thank everyone for their dedication to students, families, educational assistants, and early childhood educators in Campbell River and on Quadra Island. It's my hope that we will explore this model more, not only through School District 72, but also through the BC. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will take my seat now, hear the comments from the members opposite, but I am excited to stand up again and talk about the government's childcare initiatives that are changing lives for families in the North Island.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member that just spoke before me on bringing such a critical issue to the floor of the House today. Childcare is foundational. It's foundational to our society, supporting families, enabling parents to work, and providing essential early experiences for our youngest citizens. During Childcare Month, we take this opportunity to assess the state of childcare in our province and talk about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. It's no secret that in British Columbia today we are facing a severe shortage of accessible and affordable childcare options. It's a pressing issue that significantly affects our families and can ultimately undermine our economic stability. An alarming 64% of young children live in areas known as childcare deserts, where the demand for childcare far exceeds the available spaces, and furthermore, 75% of children in the province lack access to licensed childcare programs. Less than 10% of childcare spaces are $10 per day, less than 10%. Together, these statistics underscore the critical barriers families face in obtaining quality, affordable childcare, which underscores the urgent need for solutions. So how do we improve the situation? We must critically examine how federal funds intended to enhance childcare expansion and affordability are managed. This year, we've seen the initial strategies for fund distribution were highly flawed, leading to significant implementation challenges. In other words, a bureaucratic nightmare for parents, for providers, with the ultimate suffering going to children who are not able to access these spaces at affordable rates. For these funds to have the impact intended, we must overcome the bureaucratic obstacles and improve transparency, accountability in their allocation and their use. Other issues are threats to private childcare providers, predominantly women childcare-owned small businesses, which are vital to our childcare system. Delivering half the spaces in our province. Despite their crucial role, current policies have put these providers at risk by excluding them from opportunities. We have talked in this House, on this side, about a commitment to rectifying the current crisis by delivering tangible results and establishing strong partnerships with nonprofit, public, and private providers. We are dedicated to transforming empty promises into actionable outcomes that provide the crucial support and access our family needs. Our objective is clear. Every child in our province should have access to quality childcare. This involves not only increasing the number of available spaces, but also ensuring these spaces are affordable and meet the diverse needs of our individual and respective communities. We must strive to create a robust childcare infrastructure that supports economic growth and provides essential support to families. The ultimate goal is to provide the best possible start in life for our children, to support families and their varied needs, and to foster a future where every child and every family in British Columbia can thrive. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for North Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the comments from the member opposite. I want to use the rest of my time today to speak about all of the great childcare initiatives we've made in my riding of the North Island. First and foremost, let's talk numbers. We've invested a staggering $60,022,205 in various childcare programs from 2018 to 2023. These include initiatives like Child Care Operating Fund, Affordable Child Care Benefit, Wage Enhancement Programs, and $10 a day child care. This substantial investment underscores our unwavering dedication to providing accessible, affordable, inclusive, and high-quality child care to families across the region. But here's the real testament to our progress. From 2018 to 2023, $22,745,728 has been directly returned to the pockets of parents. This figure represents more than just a monetary value, Madam Speaker. It symbolizes the relief and support we've extended to hardworking parents, enabling them to pursue their careers and livelihood with peace of mind, knowing their children are in safe hands. These efforts have translated into tangible outcomes on the ground. We've established 269 new childcare spaces through the New Spaces Fund and Startup Grant programs, addressing the pressing need for increased capacity in our communities. Additionally, the implementation of $10 a day spaces has been a game changer, with a monthly average of 642 families benefiting from the affordable option in 2023. Furthermore, our commitment to recognizing and valuing early childhood educators is reflected in the Wage Enhancement Program. A total of $688,999 has been allocated to enhance the wages of these dedicated professionals, with an average of 127 early childhood educators receiving this support every month. By investing in their well-being, we ensure a skilled and motivated workforce that can provide the best possible care for our education of our children. The progress we've made for childcare in the North Island is nothing short of remarkable. It's a testament to our collective dedication to the well-being of our children and families, and ensuring that every child has the opportunity to thrive in a nurturing and supportive environment. This work is far from over, Madam Speaker. As we celebrate Childcare Month in BC, let us recommit ourselves to the vision of a province where every child has access to affordable, quality, and inclusive childcare. Together, we can build a brighter future for our children, our families, and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Vancouver-Langara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak to my motion relating to and supporting safety at our post-secondary institutions and campuses. As the member for Vancouver-Langara, I've spoken about this and advocated for many, many months, including since October 7th with the horrific attack by the Hamas terrorists. We've seen at Langara College, Professor Natalie Knight make statements to glorify the heinous and barbaric terrorist attack by the Hamas at the Vancouver Art Gallery Plaza on October 28th. There was a process that Langara College followed in reviewing that. But we know that even on that campus, in the riding that I represent for Vancouver Langara, that most recently there have continued to be protests that have threatened the safety of students on that campus, even to the extent where, because there's no place to protest indoors, students have been blocked from attending their classes. We've had a report from a young woman who had to hide in the washroom at Langara College because of the fear and the intimidation she felt, and she had to miss her class. At the University of British Columbia, where I've been a former student body president and chair of the alumni board, I focused a lot of my attention as well with the new president of UBC. I wrote to him back in December, as I did with Langara College in November, to call out to ensure that our university and colleges are utilizing their codes of conduct to ensure that students, staff, and faculty feel safe in these places of learning. I know that even when we saw Hillel House being under attack, incidents of trespass, protest at Hillel House, a safe place for Jewish students at UBC. This government, even in the face of a proposed student referendum, did nothing in that. The University of British Columbia, like all of the other post-secondary institutions that are public, report to the Minister of Post-Secondary Education and Skills Training, Future Skills Training. I wrote to the former minister back in December to encourage this government to hold our universities and colleges accountable to be places of learning, to be free from that intimidation. And we know that now we've seen the spread of encampments on universities. UBC, now UVic, Vancouver Island University on the Nanaimo campus. And in the face of that, the government continues to do nothing. We've seen Charlotte Cates arrested for hate speech at a rally at the Vancouver Art Gallery, who recently praised the October 7th massacre of Jews by Hamas and is supporting these encampments on behalf of Samidun. Samidun has received government funding despite direct ties to the listed terrorist entity in Canada to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, otherwise known as the PFLP. While McGill University has requested police assistance to protect student safety, and the Quebec Premier had supported that, this provincial government continues to do nothing here in BC. When I wrote to both the Minister of Post-Secondary Education and the current president of UBC in December, I noted that under UBC's discipline for non-academic misconduct, student code of conduct, the physically aggressive behavior, assault, harassment, intimidation, threats, or coercion, conduct that threatens or endangers the health or safety of any person, conduct that creates conditions that endanger the health, safety, or well-being of any person, engaging in the conduct of vexatious conduct, or engaging in the course of vexatious conduct, harassment, or discrimination that is directed at one or more specific persons that is based on any of the protected grounds under the BC Human Rights Code, and engaging in unwelcome, persistent conduct that the student knows or ought to reasonably know would cause another person to feel demeaned, intimidated, or harassed. These are exactly the kinds of threats, intimidation that are occurring at the encampment at UBC right now. And now we're in day 5 or day 6, and yet this government does nothing to ensure that these publicly funded institutions are accountable to enforce their codes of conduct. They clearly need the help. The Vancouver Police Department doesn't have jurisdiction on university endowment lands. This provincial government does. It has the level of accountability. We know that there are faculty, student, and staff guidelines as well relating to UBC's policy number 3, discrimination, and harassment. These are the policies that need to be enforced by the University of British Columbia. And we also know that in addressing anti-Semitism on campus, that as I've continued to call for over the last 7 years, in British Columbia, the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition for anti-Semitism, needs to be adopted and fully implemented in this province, and it is not. Not on these university campuses as well. And we know, Madam Speaker, under that definition, denying the Jewish people the right of self-determination by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of racial radical ideology or an extremist view of a religion is also anti-Semitic. We need to have a clear understanding of anti-Semitism in this province. This government continues to fail in that. We need to ensure those students are safe because in a civil society, it affects all of us. When one person in any community is targeted for their identity or for who they are, we cannot stand for that in this province. We need a government to ensure that our students, our faculty and staff are safe and free from harassment and intimidation on our campuses, and to deal with these encampments on these universities right now. So I encourage the government to do so, and I look forward to the response from the government.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Richmond, Queensborough.
Absolutely, Madam Speaker. We do need to recognize this. You know, I've seen this story played before. You cannot conflate the criticism of a state with anti-Semitism. That's the first point. I've seen this story before. When I was a young man in the 80s, protesting the draconian actions of the Indian government, what was said to me? You're anti-Hindu. Had nothing to do with religion, but that's what it is. We're seeing very similar things here. I'm going to read something before, campuses absolutely need to be a safe space for everyone. Everybody agrees that. All students, faculty, and staff have the right to feel safe and be learning and working in an environment free of hate. And institutions must remain committed to ensuring that balance, where ideas can be peacefully and respectfully debated without compromising on student safety. However, governments should also be very vigilant in not interfering in places where free expression should have its greatest protections. I'm going to read, since we kind of went down this route of a situation that's happening right now, I'm going to read something from a statement put out by the Jewish Faculty Network. There are Jewish faculty from universities and colleges across Canada who share a strong commitment to social justice. And they talk about encampments and protests. As faculty, we support the student protests and their demands that the university disclose its investments, divest from companies complicit in Israeli apartheid, occupation, and genocide, and terminate partnerships with Israeli universities that operate in illegal settlements in occupied Palestinian territories, or sustain or support the state of Israel's apartheid policies and its ongoing genocide in Gaza. So again, Jewish Faculty Network. They go on to say, we recognize that these students, their demands and their protests further the mission of our university. The students' demands are supported by and grounded in national and international laws. The university is bound by legal and moral responsibility to abide by the provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice, as well as the Canadian government's parliamentary resolution. They go on to state, there's a lot here. I'm not going to read it all because I only have so much time. Our students deserve to be able to protest without being smeared by accusations of anti-Semitism. Pro-Palestine perspectives and advocacy critical of Israeli state policies are met with false anti-Semitism, very similar to what I was met with in the 80s. Accusations by pro-Israeli lobby groups and their allies, which has created a chilly climate on campus. Politically motivated and baseless accusations of anti-Semitism directed at pro-Palestine voices are extremely dangerous as they are aimed at shielding Israel from criticism. These false charges furthermore perpetuate anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia. The weaponization of anti-Semitism against students opposing genocide allows the Israeli state to cement its occupation and expand its colonial and apartheid forces in Palestine. From UBC here, the Independent Jewish Voices. We are a group of Jewish students, staff, and faculty at UBC, the encampment that my friend talks about. We are inspired by the level of trust, dedication, and anti-discrimination we see in the UBC encampment. The group said in a statement, as Jewish members of the UBC community, We support and are part of this peaceful encampment. We are here alongside our peers, our friends, our classmates, our students. We add our voices to those urging UBC to take a principled and ethical stance towards the genocide taking place on Gazans. And there's a lot more there. Again, governments need to be incredibly circumspect when it comes to policing speech. That, Madam Speaker, is a slippery path down which we do not want to go. Mr. Speaker. It's a path that directly leads to totalitarianism. But our government also has zero tolerance of hate of any kind, not only on campus, but everywhere else. We have shown that from the time that we got elected here. From the very start, we reinstated the Human Rights Commissioner, which the other side got rid of, since they have already gotten partisan. An independent body that has the power to look at government action and inaction. That's also why we have launched an impressive amount of work in combating racism and discrimination, that work being debated right here. In the area of sexualized violence, today we heard about Red Dress Day, sexualized and gender-based violence, the province requires all post-secondary institutions have sexualized violence policies. When it comes to post-secondary universities, each institution has its own policies in place, and we as a government expect them to uphold those policies, as we expect the police to arrest people that commit hate speech or hate crimes, which clearly it works, it has happened. Our government has been extremely clear that hate of any kind will not be tolerated in British Columbia. We expect post-secondary institutions to support a diverse community that is safe, welcoming, and inclusive. But students and staff have the right to free expression, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Member for Vancouver Langara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I caution the member for Richmond-Queensborough in terms of his statement, and I think as he reflects upon what I'm about to say and what I said in my first 7 minutes, I would invite him to share it with anyone else in the government caucus and the Premier who shares his views. This is the reason why the member from Coquitlam-Millardville left the government cabinet and then left this government caucus. There's a complete failure and lack of understanding. The BC Human Rights Code, as I had referred to earlier, is referred to in the codes of conduct of universities and colleges. What I've been asking for, and what this government of BC has failed to do over 7 years, has implement and adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which was adopted internationally in 2015. 2019 in Canada, subsequently in other provinces of our country. BC is an outlier here. And why is this important, Mr. Speaker? For the very reason that the member from Richmond-Queensborough, as a member of the government, is standing up in this chamber today on Yom HaShoah. We are about to go into the Hall of Honor in about 10 minutes and speak in memory and blessed memory of all of those lives lost in the Holocaust. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance came up with this definition after many years of work in Stockholm in 2015 as an international standard adopted by over 30 nations in the world, for the very reasons that the member from Richmond-Queensborough stands up in this House and is still confused. Confused about the fact of what anti-Semitism is. It's not about denying Jews of the opportunities or services available. It's not about holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. It's not. There are many Jewish people, of course, who have their views of the State of Israel. But the point being, for those who continue to call out and deny the right for self-determination of Jewish people by saying that the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, for those who call for and aid and justify the killing and harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology, the extremist view of religion, that is anti-Semitic. And that's the reason why these encampments have to be stopped, dismantled, and dealt with now.
Thank you, member. Government House Leader.
Honourable Speaker, I ask that the House consider proceeding with motion number 6, standing in the name of the member for Burnaby North.
Members, unanimous consent of the House is required to proceed to motion 6 without disturbing the priorities of the motions preceding it on the order paper. If any member is opposed to the request for leave, I ask that you indicate now. Member for Burnaby North.
Thank you, Speaker. I move the motion, be it resolved that this House agrees that instead of working for those at the top, governments must always work to deliver results for all British Columbians and put people first. Speaker, this motion has been on the order paper in my name for months now, and I'm delighted that we now have an opportunity to debate it. I strongly suspect that everyone in this chamber agrees with the spirit and intent of this motion and believes that the principles, goals, priorities, and strategies that make up their party's platform is informed by a commitment to put people first. However, I also suspect that our ideas about how best to actualize this motion, how best to put people first, will vary significantly, might even be so different as to seem mutually exclusive. How we think government should work to put people forward, what we think government should do to put people first is a reflection of our worldview. A worldview that is translated into an ideology, a system of beliefs and ideas that form a basis of economic and political theory and policy. And of course, Speaker, how we think the world works determines who we sit with in this House. So, Speaker, some of my colleagues may be perplexed by my opening comments. They may have come here today prepared to hear me take potshots at those who are guided by a different set of beliefs. They may have expected me to argue in detail, armed with examples, stats, and validators that prove my party is better at putting people first. They may have expected me to offer a different set of examples, stats, and validators to demonstrate that the opposition does not put people first. However, Speaker, I am not going to do that. I leave that to others. Rather, I hope that I can use my time to help frame the debate. I want to share with you some of the questions I ask myself, questions that I hope we are all asking ourselves when we are assessing the efficacy of particular government programs and priorities and the package as a whole. So, Speaker, I hope that as the debate progresses back and forth over the next hour or so, we will hear at least implicitly what the member thinks is the answer to these kinds of questions. Who are we as a society? What do we owe to each other? What do we mean when we say our suite of actions will help people or families get ahead? Get ahead of who? Do we think that civilization is inherently competitive? Is it a big race to the top? And if so, how should the winners be rewarded? Should winners take all, most, some? How much does luck contribute to one's success? But not everyone gets to be at the top of the pyramid. Is there a social cost to the possibility that a significant percentage of society further down the hierarchy may feel more like losers than winners? And how does the fear of losing social and economic status contribute to social disintegration? Is it the role of government to help catch us if we do fall? Should government have measures in place that prevent us from falling? Does everyone get to have our basic needs met? Access to food, clothing, and shelter. So then, why is it not okay to hoard food and then resell it at an unaffordable price, but it is okay to hoard housing? Market forces play a huge role in the distribution of wealth, status, and security. Is the market allied with us in putting people first? Or left to its own devices, will the market undermine our efforts to put people first? Speaker, I have a lot more questions against which to measure what putting people first looks like. But in the interest of time, I'll take my seat and eagerly listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you. Thank you, Member.
Thank you. Member for Peace River South.
Wow. This is the last motion the NDP has put forward before an election, and I couldn't agree more that governments must always work to deliver results for all British Columbians. So let's talk about delivering results, because I couldn't agree more. Over the last 7 years specifically, I think it's important we talk about this, because this is what we're looking at going into the next election. So let's think about this over the last 7 years. We used to have what's called balanced budgets, the highest credit rating in Canada, and that's now turned into unprecedented deficits and the largest debt in British Columbia's history and credit downgrades. 7 years ago, our resource sector was thriving with massive investments, major projects being built, growing rural communities. But now, people are fleeing British Columbia looking for jobs. Investment is moving to almost anywhere except British Columbia. 16 mills shut down, even though this government said they not one would. Oil and gas investment is shrinking. Mines are looking at closing down. 7 years ago, housing was more affordable. There was hope for our children to get into a home, at least maybe even try to afford rent. But now, even though they try to mock this, maybe they should remind themselves too, housing prices have doubled in British Columbia. Most people are saying they're almost $200 away from insolvency. People have given up on even the thought of trying to own a family home. In the last 7 years, we've gone from some of the lowest taxes in Canada to 32 new or increased taxes, creating an unaffordability crisis where money isn't even enough for most people to buy food anymore in our province. 7 years ago, we had some of the best health outcomes in Canada. Now, we have almost 1 million people looking for a family doctor and some of the longest wait times for procedures in BC's history. In 7 years, this NDP has created chaos with crime on our streets, a catch and release program that they support, 6 people a day dying of a drug overdose, drive-by shootings, people not feeling safe. I could go on. These are the results that they seem to want to talk about. But I agree. We should be delivering results. We should be getting back to a government that actually knows how to deliver results. So let's talk about results. If you want to get results, get me more family doctors and nurses so every weekend I don't have to be shutting down the ER in Chetwynd. You want to talk about results? Stop releasing prolific offenders onto our streets that are causing chaos and a menace in my communities that we're seeing every single day. People don't feel safe anymore. You can't let your children go to the playgrounds anymore without fear that they're going to find drugs or drug paraphernalia. Families are being told they have to install security systems just to feel safe in their own homes because they're also being threatened there. Businesses are having to hire security guards to protect their businesses, their staff, and the patrons. This is what we're dealing with. So do I agree that we have to deliver results? Absolutely. But that hasn't happened. In fact, this government, anything they say now, in my opinion, is too little, too late. They have had 7 years, and they have taken us from first to worst in almost every category that's measured. They try to brag about how much money they spent, while the results are getting worse. So do I agree with the motion that governments must always work to deliver results? Absolutely. But why are they bringing that up now, 7 years later, on the heels of an election, when they should have started 7 years ago, if that's what their mantra was going to be, putting people first, because they have utterly failed in almost every measurable way. So let's take a moment again. It should almost be a moment of silence for the people of British Columbia for the failure of this government and the results that they've achieved for the people. It's no wonder that more and more people are saying it's time for change, to go back to a government that knows how to deliver results to help the people in the province of British Columbia. Thank you very much.
Member for Richmond South Centre.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. And I just want to take this opportunity before I start, I want to thank the member of Caribou North and member for Powell River Sunshine Coast for delivering such a phenomenal speech to help us remind that we need to stay together and support communities through a tough time. I don't want to take this opportunity to thank you, member from Caribou North, for leading that initiative. So I'm honored to rise to support a member representing Burnaby North that be resolved that the House agrees that instead of working for those at the top, government must always work and deliver results for all British Columbians and put people first. I heard a member before me making quite a few comments, but I'm going to stay focused if possible. I want to start with healthcare. One of the important things we, as a Richmond MLA, is we're celebrating the fact that we're actually finally moving forward with Richmond Hospital. Richmond Hospital should have been done 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. We're building it today. We have incorporated 2 UPCC in Richmond, helping people dealing with healthcare crisis. Doctors of BC, and I mentioned this before, stated in February 2024 that the 1 million people, British Columbia, who no longer doesn't have a family doctor is out of date. Even though there's still more work to do, even though our government still putting more investment in, right now, the current number is more close to mid to high 700,000. It is still a large number, and we need to support British Columbians. But it means investment takes time to happen. The previous member was talking about deficit. The previous member was talking about expenses. I want to remind the previous member that a lot of our government investment would be a lot cheaper, and we will be seeing results now if it was invested 2 decades ago. For example, the second medical school in SFU Surrey. All of our family doctors will have far more family doctors coming online supporting British Columbians. We're just starting to training them now. And if somebody's going to say 7 years is long enough for us to train family doctors, well, I think they should go talk to somebody who's going through medical school at a stage. On top of that, we also want to look at different things that our government is doing to support British Columbians, to support all British Columbians. First of all, I'm a father of 2 children. And I want to thank member earlier before talking about childcare, the importance of how it relieves so much financial stress for me. I am personally privileged to be able to serve here and to be representing my riding. But not everybody can afford childcare if it's at full price. The fact that government goes through all kinds of strategies to reduce the cost, to make childcare more and more affordable for others to utilize, is giving our British Columbia a chance to step up. I want to emphasize the fact that we also talk about MSP removal of the toll, ICBC rate reduction. We're supporting our seniors. We have a Clean BC investing in the environment. And we're fixing up our schools, incorporate foundry with mental health support for youth, integrated child and youth team, increase our student loan level and reducing eliminating interest rate. I apologize for that. With BC Access Grant. All of this fulfill one philosophy that I want to thank member of Burnaby North introduced. Is that we are here talking about investing in the greatest asset of British Columbia, and that's British Columbians. When we place British Columbians first and continue investing in the needs such as in healthcare, education, such as mental health care, child care, we reduce the cost in various ways to ensure that it can continue to function, operate, then we can fight against the struggle against global inflation. We can fight against the global struggle against forest fire that can create a devastation of our community. The flood, the drought, the heat dome, the devastation of what comes with climate change. Think about how great it would be if our society as a whole invested earlier in our environmental prevention program to reduce our carbon pollution in our community, to support the investment in healthcare, to support investment in education. Our British Columbia today will be able to reap all that result. The third result, that takes time to invest. Time is essence. And when we choose not to invest early and choose to and unfortunately be forced to invest later, there's a compound interest, socially, economically, environmentally, that we end up bearing today. Think how much everything would cost so much more less if we dealt with the housing issues back then. So I want to take this opportunity to thank member of Burnaby North to bring up with such a good motion to remind us all we can still work for British Columbia today. Even though we're investing now, it's costing us a lot more money. We are laying a better foundation for British Columbia for the future. And if we go back to neglecting investing in British Columbians, then we'll be pushing back all this issue later on. Let's think about our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It truly is a privilege to be able to speak to this motion today and to bring the voice of my constituents of Caribou North, that governments must always work to deliver results for British Columbians and put people first. I want to take a moment, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge that this week is National Nurses Awareness Week. And I want to thank all of the nurses in our communities for their incredible work. And I believe that government does need to work for our nurses and to make sure that they're safe. And last week, I had the opportunity to meet with a group of northern nurses, and this is what I learned. I learned that at least once a month, our nurses, 50% are exposed to weapons. 72% of our nurses in northern BC are exposed to illicit substances. 54% of our nurses in northern British Columbia experience physical violence. 85% of our nurses in northern British Columbia experience verbal or emotional abuse. 94% of nurses in northern British Columbia are working short-staffed, and 34% of nurses in northern British Columbia are seriously considering leaving nursing or are already making a plan to do so. These are not the results that our communities need. These are not the type of outcomes that our communities in northern British Columbia expect. And after 7 years of the NDP government, these are the type of results that we're experiencing in our community. Last week, I had the opportunity to talk a little bit about, in this legislature, about the impacts of what people are feeling in rural British Columbia. Today, I wanted to take my time to talk about the workers in my constituency and in northern BC. And I want to talk a little bit about the impacts of legislation changes and regulation changes and policy changes that really have a significant impact on workers in my riding, and particularly around permitting. This government is absolutely failing on getting the necessary permits out the door that keep our workers employed. A few weeks ago, we had 400 people that didn't take a paycheck home because we had a government that wasn't able to get permits out the door. So it's not just the workers in the sawmills and our pulp mills and our MDF plants and our pellet plants and all of that, that all depend on these permits to get out the door. It's our logging contractors. It's our small businesses that depend on it. It's the whole ecosystem. And when the government fails to deliver the necessary supports and permits and regulation and supports like that, our workers suffer. And our workers are suffering right now, and they need change. I also want to talk about our mining sector. Our mining sector is also equally waiting for permits. And when the government fails to deliver these permits, there are very real consequences on the people and workers in my riding. You know, the best that this government can offer when we see a mill shut down is that, look, you know what, we'll give you some help writing a resume. And then, you know what, you should consider taking that and moving to an urban setting. Maybe you could go into the tech sector. You tell that to a worker who's worked 35, 40 years in a mill, that you know what you can do now? Why don't you just pick up your family, pick up your life, and move to an urban setting? Because you know what? I think you'd be really great in the tech sector. Well, I have a message for this government, and I have a message to all of the people working behind the scenes. People in rural BC don't want to move to urban settings to get a job. We want permits issued. We want to keep our lifestyle. We like living in rural communities. We like doing the job. We're proud of the work that we do. That sweat equity that builds this province matters. And we are saying to this government, after 7 years, you've not only abandoned rural British Columbia, you've abandoned the workers.
What happened to the NDP party that stood up for workers? The only thing that this government is doing is they're putting workers out of work, and people in our communities demand and expect more.
Absolutely. Thank you, member. Member for Langford, Wanda Fuca.
Oh, thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. What a pleasure to be able to rise in this House and comments from the member across the way. I want to thank my colleague, the member for Burnaby North, for bringing forward this very important motion and for centering us today in this important conversation about how governments must deliver for people. We know that we are in a time, Mr. Speaker, where people are facing big challenges. And I want the people in Langford, Wanda Fuca to know, but also all British Columbians to know that on this side of the House, they have a government that hears them. They have a government that will work day in and day out to deliver for them. We want people on this side of the House, for British Columbians to know that we've got their back. And to have a member across the way to say that we're not standing up for rural BC is complete nonsense, and she knows that. Mr. Speaker, the members across the way, when they sat on this side of the House, had a philosophy, and that was all around leaving people to fend for themselves. And we know, on this side of the House, that that philosophy never works. They would like nothing more than to be on this side of the House and to leave it to people to fend for themselves. That is the record of the Leader of the Opposition. That was his record when he sat on this side of the House as the Minister of Health, as the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Red Tape Regulation, whatever you want to call that portfolio. But we also have to remember, I'm not going to spend my... The member for Peace River North won't have to worry. I'm not going to spend much time talking about them and their record because they're irrelevant. This is going to be, for some of them, this is going to be their last weeks in this place. We also have to remember that who was there when they sat on this side of the House? But the Leader of the Conservative Party. Let's not forget the Leader of the Conservative Party was a member of the BC Liberal Party when they called themselves a free enterprise coalition. And so let's talk about their records. Let's talk about the fact that in 2001, 2005, 2009, and 2013, they made commitments to British Columbians. And what did that result in? Massive cuts, deep cuts to the social services that we all rely on. Healthcare, education, skills training, the list goes on and on. They weakened the services that British Columbians rely on each and every day. They made people pay. They increased tolls on bridges. They doubled MSP premiums, a regressive tax, one of the only ones left in the province, in the country at the time. They turned ICBC into a dumpster fire. That is the record of the BC Conservative, BC Liberals, BC UP, doesn't matter what you call them. And what I want to conclude with on this line, Mr. Speaker, is those parties on that side of the House would like nothing more, and they do this in this place and they do this in communities, is to divide British Columbians. We're seeing that from the Leader of the Conservative Party. We see that from the Leader of the Opposition. And again, I want the message to British Columbians to be straight. These are parties, the Conservative Party and the BC UP and others, that would like nothing more than to divide British Columbia, to pit us against one another. Not on our watch. Never on our watch. We're not going backwards. British Columbians, we want you to know that you're not alone. We are going to deliver more homes for people. Just this past week, we opened the largest expansion of affordable housing in my community's history. Do you know how much the BC UP invested in Langford, Wanda Fuca housing over 16 years? 100 units. How much have we invested in the last 7 years? Over 1,000. Look at that difference. We're going to strengthen public health care. 700 new doctors, thousands of new nurses. What do the BC UP and definitely what the Conservatives want to do? They want to fire Dr. Henry. That's their actions on health care. That's what they want to do. We're going to protect BC from climate emergencies. We have a party in this House that wants to sit on this side of the House that doesn't even believe in climate change, Mr. Speaker. That's the reality of what we're sitting with. We want to build an economy that works for people, That's why we are investing in skills training. That's why we are investing and building a new university in downtown Langford to train the next generation of workers in my community. That's why we're investing more in post-secondary education, supports for industry, supports for small businesses. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, our belief on this side of the House, and I learned this from my predecessor, is an economy that is built for all is an economy that is built to succeed. That is what is going to drive our work on this side of the House right until the end of our mandate.
Member for Caribou-Chilcotin.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I agree with only one point from the previous speaker, and that is it is a pleasure to speak today about this motion. Now, the member chose not to talk a whole bunch about the motion, but I would like to bring it back to what we were here to talk about, and that is that governments are to provide results to all people in this province. And I'd like to tell you about some of the results in Caribou-Chilcotin. And I'd like to start with health care that the member touched on, the hiring of 700 doctors. It's not the first time that I've talked about Lee Butler or Hank Crinan in this room. And now I can share comments from Win Perry's family, who said in a letter to me, and they noted that the lack of care that included an array of neglect ranging from sitting in his own excrement to his mask filling with blood due to blood thinners, blood all over his food, his gown, and his bedding and his floor. Mr. Speaker, that is a result of today's government. I am absolutely frustrated with hearing over and over that we've done this, we've done that, we've done that. The division that has been created in this province is created by this government, and this member suggests that we have done that. This government forgets it's been in power for nearly a decade. There are 6,000 people in my community, in Caribou-Chilcotin, and if the member finds that funny, I'd love to hear her response. 6,000 people are on waiting lists in Caribou-Chilcotin for a doctor. That's the people that we know of. There are thousands more, Mr. Speaker, that are not being served in any way. Our roads and infrastructure are absolutely crumbling. I visited the community of 103 Mile last night. The roads can no longer be patched. They are absolutely destroyed, and they're not the only ones. Mr. Speaker, we have reached out on many occasions to talk about areas like Mahood Lake, the Inner Lakes, all of those areas. These are serious issues in rural BC, and we are struggling to be heard in any one of those ridings. The member before me talked about housing. Mr. Speaker, seniors in Caribou-Chilcotin are organizing to build their own housing. They're doing everything in their power to reach out. In fact, we have tried to get meetings with BC Housing. These are for groups in 100 Mile that already have the land and can't get meetings with BC Housing. Results do matter, no question about that. But the fact is, these seniors are struggling. And when it comes to prolific crime, it is out of hand in our communities. Absolutely everywhere you look, there are signs of the catch and release program that this government has managed over the last 7 years. And people in our ridings are frustrated and fed up with this. I agree, Mr. Speaker, with the motion today that we need to deliver results to people, but we are not seeing that where the rubber hits the road in Caribou-Chilcotin. And with respect to the cost of just about everything in this province, it is staggering to me that we have seen 32 new taxes. Is that working for the people of British Columbia? The debt in this province is absolutely growing at a staggering rate. And today we see taxes of 32 new taxes in this province, not to mention the increasing pressure that carbon tax is creating for all of us in this province, but specifically in Caribou-Chilcotin, where it is a challenge to get around there, where we do have issues of traversing a riding that takes 6 or 7 hours to drive across. Mr. Speaker, I think that there are plenty of things that this government could do better. Certainly, BC United has a plan to restore prosperity to rural British Columbia. We will permanently eliminate fuel tax, and that will save up to 15 cents per litre on gas. Additionally, we'll eliminate carbon tax on home heating fuels and cancel this Premier's plan to triple the carbon tax. Many of us, Mr. Speaker, are paying now more for carbon tax than we are the actual commodity of natural gas. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak for a little bit this morning on results in this province, and I hope we get some. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Member. Member for Surrey Panorama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure today to rise in support of the motion before us. Be it resolved that this House agrees that instead of working for those at the top, governments must always work to deliver results for all British Columbians and put people first. Mr. Speaker, there are many things that drive all of us to run for elected office and to come here to try to make things better for British Columbians. I can tell you it was the 16 long years of a government that decimated the social safety net, that was ruthless in its cuts to public education, taking away supports from students with special needs, attacks on our most vulnerable healthcare workers, and my desire to build a more just and inclusive society that drove me to run for office. And I'm so proud of the work that this government has done to date. Mr. Speaker, as I've said often, we've done lots more to do. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, I wake up every morning thinking I am so happy that we have this government in power right now rather than what we had for 16 years. Yes, we have been in government for 7 years. 7 years. It has taken time to undo the devastating damage that was done by the previous government, whether it's been in education, whether it's been in healthcare, whether it's been in building infrastructure and the social safety net. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I am so proud that we are doing this work day in, day out. Mr. Speaker, being a teacher, I always like to throw some data in there, something to show the changes that we have seen. We hear from the other side, all these taxes, you are being taxed more today. There is so much misinformation being put out there deliberately that it is very concerning because it is damaging the very fabric of our democracy. Let me put some numbers out there when it comes to taxation. An average family with 2 kids earning $100,000 used to pay $7,473 in taxes. They now pay $4,630. That's a 38% reduction. That is a fact. 8 people making $80,000 used to pay $5,637. They've had a reduction of 56%, and I'm talking about net reduction, and now they pay just over $2,500. Those earning $30,000 used to pay $177 in taxes. Can you believe that, Mr. Speaker? They now get $2,420 back in their pocket. Mr. Speaker, these are the facts. This is the data. When I look at the additional nurses that have been hired over the last 7 years, and especially over the last year, the additional doctors that have been recruited, that have been hired, when I look at the number of schools that are being built, the number of hospitals that are being built, including a new medical facility, medical school right in Surrey, a new hospital being built, a new tower in the planning at the business stage. And you know, Mr. Speaker, we have created 74,000, mostly private sector jobs last year alone. 30% year-over-year increase in new rental homes registered. And when I look at our financial rating, one of the best in the country. One of the best in the country. But if you were to listen to the rhetoric from across the way, you would believe that none of these things had happened. I don't know what kind of a world they live in. I really don't. That they have actually become to believe the misinformation that they create and spread. And let me tell you, Mr. Speaker,
I advise the member to be cautious with her words.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that very kind reminder. And I will go on to say, Mr. Speaker, I am so proud that for the last 7 years we've had this government, and I know the people of British Columbia feel it every single day. I always have to mention childcare. When it comes to childcare alone, the number of people who've been able to go back to work and the millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, that have gone back into people's pockets, families' pockets, and that money also spurs our economy. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for the opportunity to highlight some of the things we've done and why it matters who we vote for when it comes to election day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Member for Richmond North Centre.
Today, I stand before you, Mr. Speaker, not just as a representative of Richmond North Centre, but as a voice for all British Columbians who feel the crushing weight of the failed policy under this NDP government. Our communities demand safety, affordability, and trust in their leadership, quality simply missing from this NDP government. British Columbians are grappling with a cost of living crisis that has spiraled out of control under this government's watch for the past 7 years. While our citizens struggle to make ends meet, NDP political staff received pay rises of up to 17%, a clear indication of where this government's priorities lie. Not doctors, not nurses, not the more than half of all British Columbians who are less than $200 away from being unable to pay their bills. No one gets a 17% pay increase unless you work for the NDP. This is not just poor governance, but a betrayal of the public trust. The people they purport to stand for are doing worse under their watch than any time in this province's history. I'm sure my NDP colleagues don't need to be reminded that they have increased taxpayer-supported debt per person by more than 150%. The bureaucracy grows, the red tape runs rampant, and the political elite that make up the premier staff and friends are profiting. It begs the question, who does this government stand for? And who does this government work for? The public safety crisis in our communities is a sign of this government's misalignment with the needs of the people. Our streets have become battlegrounds for criminal activity, with small businesses bearing the brunt of the rampant theft and vandalism. The NDP's response? A reckless decriminalization experiment has only exacerbated the issue, with drug-related deaths reaching unprecedented levels and patients and nurses in BC hospital having to deal with secondhand fentanyl smoke and cockroaches. When it comes to delivering results, decriminalization has delivered the worst result we ever seen. The NDP Premier stubbornly refuses to scrap his failed experiment, a policy BC United will end immediately. It is shameful and shameful that members opposite continue to stand and support what is clearly and obviously a disaster. In Richmond, our hospital proposed safe consumption site was met with overwhelming opposition from the community, who were largely ignored. The NDP pushed forward without proper consultation, disregarding the very voices they serve, only to have more than 22,000 signatures presented before them to stall their agenda. This is not an isolated incident, but a pattern of neglect and poor decision-making that affects us all. The government's approach to public safety, to crime, prevention is fundamentally flawed. We need a dramatic shift towards a system that prioritizes recovery, treatment, and rigorous enforcement to protect our communities. BC United is committed to implementing policy that focus on treatment and recovery, providing real solutions to the drug crisis and restoring safety to our streets. We stand for a government that works for all, for each and every one of us, not just the select few at the top. As we move forward, let's remember the real issues and the leadership necessary to address them. It is time for a change, time to bring back safety, trust, and affordability to the people of British Columbia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Member for Richmond, Steveston.
Thank you. I am pleased to be able to speak in favor of this motion to work to deliver results for all British Columbians and put people first. Everyone in BC, regardless of whether they're a lifelong resident or new arrival, wants to be able to build a good life for themselves and their loved ones. With inflation pushing up prices of necessities, we're taking action to deliver services that help address those costs. Half of all British Columbians will menstruate at some point in their lives. With menstruation comes health costs that can add up, like prescription birth control. People should be able to make decisions about their sexual and reproductive health without worrying about cost, and our government's program covers 100% of the cost for over 60 commonly used birth control methods, including pills, contraceptive injection, and IUDs. Universal coverage of contraception is part of our government's work to make health care more affordable and accessible for people in British Columbia. What's more, contraceptive options can now be prescribed by a pharmacist through the Minor Ailments Prescribing Program, another way we're reducing barriers to health care. Our government is working to deliver results for all British Columbians and put people first. As a mom of 3 kids, I know how fast family costs add up, and with global inflation pushing up the cost of children's essentials like good food and clothing, parents need access to affordable, good quality childcare options. Other governments left parents to fend for themselves, with ever escalating costs and even having to worry about the safety of their childcare option. Our government has been making record investments so families don't have to go it alone. There are now over 15,000 $10 a day childcare spaces in BC, and we're on track for 20,000 by 2026. The families of another 70,000 children are receiving a benefit of up to $900 per month per child through the Child Care Fee Reduction Initiative. And parents with low incomes may even qualify for free childcare through the Affordable Child Care Benefit. Not only are families' well-beings supported by these investments in childcare, but the program is an economic success as well. Parents, usually mothers, can end up underemployed or dropping out of the workforce while their children are small. Good, affordable childcare means better earnings for the parent and a boost in quality and availability of workers for a successful business environment. We are putting people first and taking action to deliver results for British Columbians. Climate change is real, caused by humans, and is an urgent global crisis that requires BC to take action to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in order to protect people and the environment. Shockingly, some members of this chamber don't believe that this is the case and will double down on statements like greenhouse gases are good for trees. Those trees, Honourable Speaker, are going up in flames. Wildfires in BC have been the worst on record, exacerbated by record drought and record heat. Our homes, livelihood, food security, and lives are threatened by climate change. Instead of abandoning BC to the ravages of a changing climate, our government is investing in year-round wildfire service, restoration of our watersheds, and seizing the economic opportunity of transitioning to a clean economy. The direct costs of inaction on climate are astronomical. Just one major event can cost billions of dollars in direct costs and make a massive dent in GDP. We cannot afford to do nothing, which is exactly what the other parties will do. Our government is committed to climate action, and Clean BC guides government's actions to meet BC's emissions targets and build a cleaner, stronger economy for everyone. Green jobs are across industries: tech, forestry, plastics, renewable energy, ocean economy, to name just a few. And they're good-paying, sustainable jobs to support families and communities for decades to come. They're across this beautiful province and offer a generational opportunity to create a better future for our children. We've been taking action implementing Clean BC, and our economy is the strongest in Canada since we formed government in 2017. There's also the important public benefits in human health, biodiversity, and mitigation of climate impacts. Our plan for a clean economy will deliver the results people want: good-paying jobs and a beautiful British Columbia where we can all live, work, and play.
Thank you, Member. Member for Kootenay East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I find it absolutely incredible that this NDP government would want to spend their last motion before we go to election to talk about the work of government and the results for people. Quite something, quite astounding. The member from Langford, Wanda Fuca, said that this NDP government has their back. And I will agree with the member from Surrey Panorama when she said it's taken 7 years for this government to undo what the former government has done. Quite something. We had a great economy, best credit rating anywhere in the country, and they've been able to dismantle all of that in just 7 years. The rhetoric just doesn't meet the reality, Mr. Speaker. Over the past 7 years, our province has witnessed a sharp decline in optimism and economic stability. Housing is so expensive that no one can afford it. Taxes are so high, our wallets are empty. Healthcare is so mismanaged that we've lost trust in it being there when we need it. The handling of the drug overdose problem that has made addictions even worse. Streets so unsafe that small businesses close under the weight of unending theft and intimidation from the same caught and released criminals. This is the harsh reality British Columbians have come to know. Life in British Columbia has become increasingly difficult due to rising costs that are a direct result of this NDP's government policies. Since 2017, the carbon tax has more than doubled, significantly driving up gas prices, which are now the highest in North America. Shockingly, amid the NDP's carbon tax increase, more than half of the families in British Columbia are a mere $200 away from being unable to pay their bills. Instead of alleviating the burdens, the NDP themselves sit among those at the top, being the same people they condemn in this motion. At last count, NDP MLAs own 102 properties, profiting nearly $8.5 million from real estate sales since the election. Between the Leader of the Opposition and the Premier, only the Premier has speculated. He sold his Victoria condo for a $150,000 profit shortly before it would be being subject to the speculation tax, capitalizing on its Airbnb potential during a housing crisis. The situation reveals an NDP government that pads its pockets while the people suffer. Moreover, amid this hypocrisy, the economic trajectory of our province is concerning. People are tired of seeing their bank accounts drained, with little to no improvement in affordability, access to health care, or housing availability. If taxing people were the solution to our crisis, we would have seen positive results by now. However, the NDP imposes 32 new or increased taxes while so many are faced with a skyrocketing cost of living crisis. To make things worse, under the NDP, our province's economic stability is falling. Credit downgrades have become the norm, each downgrade pulling more money from the pocket of hardworking British Columbians. The result of the downgrades is high borrowing costs, escalating living expenses, and increased taxes. These cost pressures are staggering and will only get worse. And now, at a time when British Columbians are already stretched thin by soaring living costs, the Premier quietly awarded partisan NDP staff raises of up to 17%, with some receiving raises as high as $17,000. These huge hikes starkly contrast the low increases given to essential workers like nurses and teachers, highlighting an unbelievable mismatch of government priorities during a cost of living crisis. This financial decision not only reflects a disconnect in priorities, but also feeds into a larger pattern of fiscal irresponsibility. Such actions reveal a government that is more focused on self-service than public service, undermining the trust of British Columbians. It is in this context that we must view the motion presented today by the NDP. This motion, claiming to prioritize the needs of all citizens, is misleading and serves as a disservice to the people of British Columbia. It glosses over the serious issues of NDP mismanagement and fails to propose any significant measures to genuinely enhance affordability for everyday people. BC United is prepared to change this narrative. We will make life more affordable in BC by eliminating the provincial fuel tax and removing the property transfer tax for first-time home owners up to $1 million. Our focus will be in reinvesting in BC's world-class healthcare system and prioritizing the safety of British Columbians over ideological projects. Rather than engaging in political stunts, BC United are committed to implementing effective policies that genuinely put British Columbians first and restore stability in our province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member from Burnaby North to be able to speak to Always Working to deliver results to all British Columbians. Our government has always put people first in British Columbia and not just the top 2% wage earners. Over the last 7 years, the government has delivered many programs to British Columbians to help them out with new challenges we all face every day. Well, let's speak to the issues around mental health and addiction areas and the treatment. In 2019, the provincial government increased the per diem funding for the residential recovery homes by 15%, and that was the first increase in over a decade. And the Select Standing Committee on Government Services and Finance heard from various committees, organizations, nonprofits, and other operators about the needs that they had. It was often repeated during these hearings, Mr. Speaker, about the good work that these operators were providing, but the funding formula that they were getting was less money than what it would cost to kennel your dog for a day. Honourable Speaker, we often hear how it takes time to get into a treatment facility, but yet I rarely hear anyone from that side ever talk about the valuable services that are in the community. Many of these facilities have spaces on a daily basis, and you can walk right in and begin your recovery. Many of these people have just been, were just incarcerated, and they've been released with conditions, and they're going to find their way to one of these places and seek help and assistance without having to open their wallets. Operators like Susan Sanderson of Realistic Recovery will see a per diem rate go from $35.90 to $60. This means more time to provide assistance to the clients rather than spending time looking for grants and other funding sources as they try to make a difference in these people's lives. We all know people in recovery do well when they have a roof over their head, they're in a warm bed, and they're fed. They don't have to worry about the basic necessities of life. They just need to concentrate on getting themselves better. Honourable Speaker, this government has recognized the good work that these organizations have done, and now we are properly funding them. To ensure organizations are properly funded, this funding formula includes a cost of living adjustment so these organizations don't fall behind in funding in their future. We all know the challenges that are in our healthcare system, but we know we're on a path to making things better for all British Columbians, and that's why I want to take the time right now to talk about the differences at this side of the House as opposed to the opposite. I remember it well in 2014 as a city councillor sitting through one of the longest public hearings that I'd ever experienced while people displayed their opposition to a housing project where a hospital was supposed to be built. Honourable Speaker, a hospital was supposed to be built in Panorama. The planning was done, the roads were built, everything was in place except for the hospital. The land was sold when the leader of the opposition was the finance minister, and then after a few flips of the property, it came to City Council, and the community was outraged that they no longer had a hospital in that area. People lined up for hours to express their anger. There were a whole community of people that were grieving their loss of a hospital in their neighborhood. And fast forward to where we are today. We hear about the overworked staff and overcrowding of the Surrey Memorial Hospital, and we're committed to building another tower on the site, and we're addressing their staffing issues. But where would we be today if that hospital was built in Panorama? What would the impact be felt by the patients and staff of Surrey Memorial Hospital today if the hospital in Panorama was built 10 years ago? Honourable Speaker, our government is taking action as we speak right now, while construction is underway to build a new hospital in my riding of Cloverdale. The hospital comes with a needed regional cancer centre, and the hospital includes 168 inpatient beds, 5 operating rooms, 4 procedure rooms, an emergency department, 55 treatment spaces, and a medical imaging department, 2 MRI machines, 3 CT scanners. And the Regional Cancer Centre, Honourable Speaker, it will have oncology, ambulatory care unit, 50 exam rooms, 54 chemotherapy treatment spaces, functional imaging including PET and CT, cyclotron, and room for 6 linear accelerators and a radiation therapy to provide the care for the people that are diagnosed with cancer. Honourable Speaker, our government removed those unfair tolls on the Port Mann and the Golden Ears Bridge. Family members who had to take one of those bridges every single day where other people in Vancouver could freely move around without having to pay a toll. Some families were saving over $1,500 a year. These are the fees that were unfairly put into effect by the members of the opposite. Noting the hour, Honourable Speaker, I call for adjournment of the debate.
Members, you heard the question. All those in favour to adjourn the debate indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Government House Leader.
Yes, Honourable Speaker, I move to adjourn the House.
You heard the question. All those in favour indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1:30 p.m. today.